In this lesson, we're going to discuss the control panel. If you'd like to follow along, go to File, Open. And in the Layout Samples folder, go to 0203, Get Control of the Control Panel, and just click Open. Advanced users of InDesign use keyboard shortcuts. These shortcuts save time to accomplish tasks faster. A quick example, if I go to my type tool, the big T, I could just click and drag across some type to select all the type in the frame. But let's say I had a frame that had a lot of type in it. It would be a lot faster to just hit Command A on a Mac, Control A on a PC, and I'll select all the text in the frame instantly. Well, there are commands for using the control panel as well, and they save a lot of time. If I hit Command 6 on a Mac, Control 6 on a PC, I'm selecting the first field in the control panel, which in this case happens to be the type family name. You have to remember the control panel is a contextual panel. This means it depends on what tool or kind of object you have selected as to the features that are available in the control panel. If I wanted to move around through the various fields in the control panel, all I have to do is hit my Tab key. Every time I hit my Tab key, I move to the next field to the right. Right now, I'm in the point size field, and if I wanted to change the size of my type, if I wanted to make it smaller, I could hit the down arrow on my keyboard. If I wanted to make the type bigger, I could hit my up arrow. Let me hit my Tab key again, and I'm moving through the various fields. Oh, but what happens if I go by the field that I actually wanted to be in? Is there a way to go backwards through the fields? Well, I had mentioned earlier holding down your Shift key to shift into reverse. Well, if I hit Shift Tab, I'm going backwards through the various fields in the control panel. I wonder what would happen if I stop in the style name for this particular style of Myriad Bold. Well, if I hit my down arrow, it's going through the various styles. Let me hit my up arrow, and you can see it's a quick way to go through the various styles. Let me hit Shift Tab again. The same thing is true if I wanted to change the actual type family itself. Let me hit my up arrow key, and it's actually going to go through the names of the type families, which are alphabetical, back towards the beginning of the alphabet. If I hit my down arrow, it's going to go down alphabetically towards Z. So I can actually see what this particular headline would look like in various typefaces. As I mentioned earlier, the control panel is contextual. What would happen if I change tools? Well, you can see it no longer has to do with type options. It has to do with the position of the object in the layout, its width, its height, how big it is, whether it's rotated. So it is totally different than when I'm in the type tool. One of the things that people don't know about the various fields, not only in the control panel, but in any panel that has to do with measurements and also dialog windows, those fields are calculators. Let me hit Command 6 or Control 6 to get to that first field. If I wanted to change the position, I could hit my up arrow, and you can see that my headline is moving ever so slightly, one point at a time, towards the right. Let me select, with my selection tool, this object towards the top. What if I wanted to make it a certain amount narrower? Well, I could click in my width field and hit a minus sign on my keyboard, which is the hyphen. Maybe I want to make it, how about 5 picas less? Let me type a 5 in there. In case you're wondering about picas and points, We'll talk about changing your units of measure to inches in an upcoming lesson about preferences. For now, we'll work in picas and points. So if I wanted to make this 5 picas narrower, I can type -5. And you can see it's now 5 picas narrower. What if I like the position of this object? It seems to be centered in my page. What if I wanted to keep it centered perfectly in my page? Well, when InDesign was first introduced, there was a major breakthrough. It has to do with this little proxy to the left of the control panel. It's called the reference point. It allows me to pick an origin point for any change to an object. Let's say I wanted to keep this object centered in the page. Well, this proxy represents the bounding box points around the object, plus its center. So if I click on any of these center points and increase the width, watch what happens. How about I type a plus mark and I make it 5. So it's going to be 5 picas wider. Well, because I have a center reference point selected, it's going to make it 5 picas wider from the center out. Let me hit enter or return. And you can see that's exactly what it did. Now that may not seem like a big deal, but if you have a bunch of centered objects in your layout and you need to make them all wider, this saves a lot of time. Or even if they're not centered, let's say, let me click this object and drag it across so it snaps to the upper right corner of my margins. If I wanted that upper right corner of the object to remain where it is, I would hit that upper right proxy point. If I wanted to make this object, let's say, wider, I would type a plus sign. Oh, but maybe I want to make it 2 inches wider. Can I do that? Of course, it's a calculator. It knows how to convert units of measure. So I'm going to type 2, either an inch mark, or I could type IN for inches. And then I'm going to hit return or enter. You'll notice that the upper right point of that object stayed exactly where it was, and it made it wider towards the left. So I have total control of calculating the size and the position of any object from any point in that object. I can also divide. If I have an insert point next to my width in the width field, and I type a slash character, and then I type a 2 after it, I'm dividing the width by 2. It's going to change the width to the upper right corner of the object because that proxy point has been selected. Let me hit enter or return, and you can see that's exactly what it did. I can also multiply. Let me multiply the height. The multiply sign is the asterisk, so you have to hit Shift 8 to type an asterisk in the height field. And maybe I'll multiply it by 2. And I'm going to hit enter or return. And you can see that it made it taller, yet that upper right corner, which was selected in the proxy, remained exactly where it was. So there's a lot that you can do with these various commands and calculations in fields throughout all of the panels in InDesign and the dialog windows that contain measurements. If you're switching from Quark to InDesign, you might be more comfortable having the control panel down the bottom of your window. And that's because the measurements panel in Quark is in that position. So if you really want to do that, you can go to this little downturn arrow to the far right of the control panel with what looks like 3 tire tread marks next to it. If I click down on that, that options menu shows me the options for the control panel. And one of those options is dock at bottom. So that will make you feel a lot more comfortable if you're switching from Quark. I would recommend that you get used to the way InDesign actually works and leave the control panel at the top. We're going to continue talking about the basics of InDesign in the next lesson when we start talking about preferences.